You know, my father was 14 years old before he knew there was any other music besides country music. He was born in 1940 in Texas, Beaumont, I think. Beaumont, Texas. 14 before he knew there were other forms of music besides country music. They didn't call it country music, they called it music. There was no other kind in his mind. 14. He just didn't know anything about the rest of the world. Yeah, that's ignorance, but also he didn't worry or stress about anything outside of his sphere of influence. He knew his little Texas world, country music, that's it, that's all he was concerned about. There's pros and cons to that, but let's contrast it with today. A 14, 15, 16, 18-year-old today, he's constantly surrounded about information from the rest of the world. All the music genres, everything out there is in front of your face all the time on these little screens. But not just the cool things like music, but the tragedies, the catastrophes, the apocalypses are all in front of all these kids all the time. Now, a 14-year-old knows about Gaza. Now, a 14-year-old knows about climate change. Now, a 14-year-old knows about potential nuclear war, knows about government overreach, knows about political divides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The overwhelm of information that young people have now, in direct contrast to a couple of generations ago, is astonishing. It is therefore not surprising that we have massive amounts of depression and anxiety, and even worse, among young people today. Too much information, and too much information poured into young brains that think they have some responsibility over this information. But you don't. In the old world, you wouldn't have even known. You wouldn't have known anything about anyone else in the rest of the world except through hearsay and stories, right? Travelers would come through and tell you what was over the horizon. Wow, interesting. We have tricked ourselves into thinking just because we can know everything, we should know everything. Just because we can know about all the world's crises, that we have some responsibility, therefore, over every other parts of the world's crises. We don't, because we can't. We literally cannot. We have not evolved to accommodate this kind of emotional burden and sense of responsibility. We're not equipped for it, and therefore we're breaking down over it. Now, I don't want to be a Luddite and go back to a world where you don't even know that there are other kinds of music except country. Wow, to me, that is a diminishment of all the wonderful things this life has to offer. So no, I don't want to go back to ignorance. But how do we figure out a way to accommodate these new levels of information without literally killing ourselves over it? How do we take it in and let it through to say, this is not mine to bear. I can bear witness and hold heart space, which is challenging enough. I can't do anything about it, therefore I must let it go as a burden. That's some deep wisdom. That's some deep, hard stuff to learn. So we have to start teaching our young people that instead of talking about banning TikTok and banning this and controlling and regulating more top-down authoritarianism, no, let's reframe and learn how to accommodate these changes in this world and say, well, I don't need to take on all that. And for some of you, that may look like a media fast, just stepping back. I've done that, and it's pretty effective. A couple times a year, I go completely off grid for stretches at a time and disappear, and it's really rejuvenating. So, yeah, cutting yourself off is part of the strategy. But how do we marry the staying connected without staying overwhelmed? That is a tricky formula, but it's something that bears contemplation. We don't need to take on the burden of responsibility of all the world's ills just because it is possible to know about them. Ciao, my friends.